Welcome to the Still Bible. Tonight, let's take a gentle journey into the story of Moses and the burning bush, one of the quietest, strangest, and most spiritually profound moments ever whispered across desert winds. But first, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Let the day fall away. Take a breath slowly, softly, and easily. You're not here to be rushed. You're here to be restored, to breathe, to listen, to drift gently into a space that is quiet, ancient, and sacred. Tonight is not about study. It's not about theology. It's not even about understanding. It's about remembering. Remembering what it feels like to be seen, to be still, to hear something not loud, but deeply true. We begin with a man named Moses, but not the Moses we know from the movies. Not the leader, not the lawgiver, not the man of miracles. This Moses is older, forgotten, a shepherd in exile. His story begins not with a miracle, but with years of silence. Decades, in fact. 40 years he lived in Egypt, raised in Pharaoh's court, then 40 more in the desert, tending sheep. He has buried his identity, buried his fire, buried his past. He has learned to live small, to stay invisible, to let the flame within him flicker quietly in the dark, until one day, something shifts. The Bible says he led his flock far across the wilderness to a place called Horeb, the mountain of God. He wasn't seeking a revelation. He was just doing his job. Sometimes, the most sacred moments arrive while we are simply surviving. Then he sees it. A bush, on fire, but not consumed. And Moses does something simple, something small. He turns aside. He notices. That's when everything changes. Because God is always speaking. The real miracle is when we finally stop to listen. And then, the voice. Moses. Moses. Not shouted, not thundered, just spoken. Twice. Soft and specific. Because Moses had forgotten his name. But heaven hadn't. Take off your sandals, the voice says. For the ground where you are standing is holy. That's the mystery. The ground hadn't changed, but Moses had. He became aware. That's all holiness needs awareness. The fire didn't make the ground holy. The noticing did. And maybe tonight, your noticing begins to. Maybe, like Moses, you've wandered far. Maybe you've stopped expecting anything miraculous. Maybe the dreams you once carried feel too distant now, too heavy, too tired. But then something small invites your attention. A strange moment, a flicker, a whisper, and maybe, like Moses, you turn aside. You stop. You listen. You realize that even here, in this moment, in this room, with your breath slowing and the night pressing in, you are on holy ground. You see, Moses wasn't called because he was perfect. He was called because he was willing, even when scared, even when doubtful, even when unsure. And the voice that called to him still calls. It doesn't need fire. It doesn't need mountains. Just stillness. Just someone willing to say, I'm here. And that's what tonight is. A simple showing up. A sacred slowing down. A remembering that the divine is not far away. It's as close as breath, as near as silence, as alive as a bush that burns but will not be consumed. So tonight, we rest in that silence. We enter slowly, like Moses approaching the flame. We take off our sandals. We leave our rush behind. There is nothing to prove here. There is only presence. It's easy to forget that Moses was 80 years old when the bush burned. 80. An age when most people imagine rest, retirement, or reflection, not divine encounters. But this is where we must challenge our notions of timing. God does not operate on the timelines we understand. When we think things are over, He may just be beginning. We live in a world of hurry, but the desert moves slowly, and God, in this moment, matches the pace of sand. Slow, ancient, patient. There's something healing in that, in knowing we are not late. If Moses wasn't too late at 80, then we are not too late either. We don't always need to be achieving. Sometimes, we just need to be attentive. To watch the margins of our lives, the quiet corners, the odd interruptions, the burning bushes we usually walk past. Because God doesn't always use palaces. He often uses the wilderness. And in this story, there is no thunderstorm. Just a shepherd and some sheep. Just desert air and dry branches. Just a flicker of flame that refuses to die. And a whisper that knows your name. That is where we are tonight. Not in a rush. Not on a stage. Just on sacred ground, with no shoes, no shield, no scripts, just the strange stillness of being seen. You are seen. That is what Moses discovers. Not that he is brilliant, not that he is brave, but that he is noticed, known, called. There is something powerful about being called by name. In a world where we're often reduced to numbers, usernames, and labels, God calls Moses by name twice. Because sometimes we need to hear it more than once. Not because God forgets, but because we do. We bury our names beneath performance, beneath failure, beneath time. But the divine never stops calling. And when He does, something sacred stirs. And perhaps, as you lie there now, eyes soft, breath slow, there's a name waiting on divine lips for you too. Maybe your name, maybe your story, maybe your next beginning. We are not just spectators in Moses' story. We are echoes of it. Each of us wandering our own Midian, wondering if the flame inside us has gone out. But it hasn't. It waits. And when the time is right, and the silence is deep enough, it burns again. Not to destroy, but to invite, to draw us near, to remind us that even here, even now, the ground beneath our feet is holy, and we are not alone. So come with me. Let the flicker of that ancient fire draw you into the mystery. Let the voice that called to Moses whisper to your soul. This is not just a story. This is an encounter, a sacred remembering, a quiet flame that still speaks. You are not forgotten. You are not finished. You are still called. And tonight, we will walk slowly, gently, with Moses, into the desert, toward the fire, toward the voice. This is the Still Bible, and we are only just beginning. The fire was already burning, but it wasn't just heat or light. It was attention. It was invitation. Moses stands still, and the voice calls again. This time not just to name him, but to claim him. I am the God of your father, the voice says. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses, this desert wanderer, this forgotten prince, hides his face. Because the moment becomes too much. Not because of fear, but because something inside him remembers. He remembers who he came from, who he was born to, who he was once told he could become. But he also remembers what he did. The body in the sand, the fleeing, the silence, the self-exile. Shame doesn't always shout. Sometimes it settles quietly into the soul like dust. And now, here it is again, stirred by a voice that sees it all and still calls him forward. That is the nature of divine calling. It never begins in your strengths. It starts in your silence, in your self-doubt, in the very place you feel least qualified to stand, because that's the place where grace has room to move. I have seen the misery of my people, God says. I have heard them crying. I am concerned. God's voice isn't thundering vengeance. It's compassion, not declarations of wrath, but tenderness. I have come down to rescue them, he says. And Moses listens because finally someone sees what he saw. Back in Egypt, years ago, the injustice, the oppression, the violence. He tried to do something once, and it broke him. He ran. He hid. But now the voice says, I saw too. I see still. It is not over. And then the call. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt. And everything in Moses pushes back. This isn't what he expected. He was curious, maybe even hopeful, but he did not come to be sent. He came to listen, to maybe heal, to maybe understand. But now he is asked to lead, to return, to face the place he fled. And so the questions begin. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? And the voice replies, not with a resume or reassurance, but with presence. I will be with you. That's it. Not a map, not a plan, just presence, because that is always enough. God does not give Moses credentials. He gives him company. We often ask, who am I? But the better question is, who is with me? Because calling is not about capacity. It's about companionship. God does not look for the qualified. He calls the willing, and then he walks beside them. Moses isn't done questioning. If I go to them and say, the God of your ancestors has sent me, and they ask, what is his name? What should I say? And here, the voice offers something sacred. A name, not a name like ours. Not a label or a title, but a mystery. I am who I am. Tell them, I am has sent me. It is not an answer to a question. It is a doorway to wonder. A name that refuses to be boxed in. A name that is both a noun and a verb. Being itself. Presents itself. I am. The one who was, and is, and will be, always. This is who calls Moses. Not a distant deity, but a present presence. An unburning flame. And still, Moses hesitates. What if they don't believe me? What if they say, the Lord did not appear to you? And gently, patiently, the voice responds again, not with proof, but with partnership. What is that in your hand? Moses looks down. It's just a staff, a stick, a shepherd's tool, something ordinary. And God says, throw it on the ground. And when he does, it becomes a serpent. And Moses jumps back, not because of the snake, but because the ordinary just became sacred. That is the rhythm of calling. God does not invent something new. He reclaims what's already in your hand. A staff becomes a sign. A shepherd becomes a savior. The miraculous begins in the mundane. And even still, Moses protests. I'm not eloquent, he says. I am slow of speech. But the voice doesn't flinch. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives sight or makes blind? Is it not I? Now go. I will help you speak. I will teach you what to say. Calling is not about confidence. It is about willingness. But Moses, like many of us, reaches for a final plea. Please send someone else. And for the first time, the voice stirs with emotion. Anger, not the rage of rejection, but the ache of invitation denied. Yet still, God bends. He offers help. Aaron, your brother. He can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you. He will be your voice. I will help you both. Even here, even after resistance and fear, the call remains. It is not rescinded. It is not revoked. It is met with mercy. That is how calling works. Not as a command shouted from the clouds, but as a patient voice whispering beside a burning bush. It meets you where you are and leads you toward where you never thought you'd go. Not alone, but accompanied, always. So take a moment. Ask yourself, what is in your hand? What fire have you been walking past? What name have you forgotten that's still being whispered? And if the answer comes not in clarity, but in stillness, let that be enough. Because sometimes the bush burns slowly, and the calling comes not in fire, but in a soft breath. I am with you, still. The mountain still smolders behind him. The bush no longer burns, but the memory does. Moses begins the walk down from Horeb not just with sandals dusted in desert, but with something heavier responsibility. There's no trumpet, no choir of angels, just the quiet rustle of wind and the faint pulse of destiny beating in his chest. He doesn't run. He doesn't rush. He simply begins. Because that's how most callings start step by slow step, with obedience taking the place of confidence. When he reaches home, Zipporah sees something different in him. Not louder, not more certain, but stiller. There's a weight behind his words now, a clarity behind his eyes. And so, they begin to pack. Not for vacation, not for trade, but for confrontation. Because the road back to Egypt is more than a return, it's a reckoning. The staff is now more than wood. It's story. Proof of what's possible. A whisper of the miraculous in a world full of doubt. But before Moses can leave Midian behind, there is one more voice. God speaks again. Go in peace, he says. Those who sought your life are dead. It's a strange comfort. Time has passed. Enemies have faded. But the fear? The fear hasn't. Still, Moses obeys. He loads the donkey, gathers his family, and sets his face toward Pharaoh. And somewhere on that winding road, God speaks again. This time, not with warmth, but with warning. When you return to Egypt, perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart. He will not let the people go. This is no fairy tale. This is no guaranteed triumph. This will be resistance met with resistance. The road ahead is not smooth. It's sacred. And sacred roads are often the hardest to walk. And then a moment, shrouded in mystery, a pause in the narrative. One night on the journey, God confronts Moses, not in fire, not in words, but in danger. A moment that feels like judgment. The text is cryptic, confusing, but Zipporah, with instinct sharper than theology, acts. She circumcises their Sonan act of covenant, of belonging. a sign that the house of Moses is not above the law. That calling does not cancel obedience. It deepens it. And then the danger passes, and Moses walks forward, because calling will always carry confrontation. Sometimes with others, sometimes with systems, sometimes with God, but often, first, with yourself. When he reaches the borderlands of Egypt, he sees a figure approaching. It's Aaron, his brother, his voice, his companion. God has kept his word. And together they return, not as spies, not as fugitives, but as messengers. They enter Egypt not with an army, but with a message. Let my people go. But first, they gather the elders of Israel, the forgotten, the enslaved, the bent-backed, and hope-starved. And Moses speaks. He tells them of the bush, of the name, of the promise. And when they doubt, as anyone would, he shows them the signs. The staff becomes a serpent. The hand becomes leprous, and then clean again. Water turns to blood. And the people believe. They bow in worship. Because hope real, hope does that. It bends knees and lifts eyes. Even in chains. Especially in chains. And then they go to Pharaoh, the man who sits in splendor, who speaks and cities tremble, who wears gold, not as ornament, but as armor. And into that court walk two men, a former prince and a shepherd. Moses speaks. The God of Israel says, "Let my people go." Pharaoh's gaze doesn't flicker. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't yell. He questions. Who is the Lord that I should obey him? It's not just a dismissal. It's a dare. And with that, the resistance begins. Pharaoh increases the oppression. He demands bricks without straw. He makes the people suffer more. And the people turn, not on Pharaoh, but on Moses. May the Lord judge you, they say. You have made us stink in Pharaoh's sight. And Moses? He returns to God, broken. I did what you said, he prays. Why then have you brought trouble? Why did you even send me? He's not angry. He's hurt. This isn't what he pictured. This isn't how calling was supposed to go. And God responds, with a promise. Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out. Sometimes, obedience leads to things getting worse before they get better. Sometimes, the deepest part of the calling is learning to trust even when your efforts seem to make things harder. The wilderness gave Moses a voice, but Egypt will teach him perseverance. And the journey has only just begun. It starts with water. Moses lifts the staff. Aaron stretches his hand over the river. And the Nile, Egypt's lifeblood, its pride, its God, in liquid form, turns to blood. Fish die. The water stinks. People dig along the banks for something drinkable. And still, Pharaoh's heart stays hard. Because sometimes, power doesn't tremble at warnings. It digs deeper. And so, the contest begins. This is not just punishment. This is a revelation. Each plague, a message. Each act, a confrontation between heaven and empire. Because Egypt doesn't just worship Pharaoh. It worships everything. The river, the sun, the animals, even insects. And now, the God of the Hebrews is not just asking for freedom. He's tearing down every false god, one plague at a time. Next come the frogs, Not just a few, everywhere. In ovens, in bedrooms, in bowls and beds. A sacred creature in Egyptian religion now becomes a nuisance, a judgment. And again, Pharaoh begs. Make it stop, he pleads. Moses prays. The frogs die. And once the crisis fades, Pharaoh's heart returns to stone. The pattern is set. Crisis, relief, defiance. And so, God sends gnats. Dust becomes insects. Tiny chaos. Unstoppable. Undefinable. The magicians of Egypt try to copy the plague and fail. This is the finger of God, they whisper. But Pharaoh will not listen. So the flies come, swarms. Not mere insects' disturbance made visible, buzzing proof that Egypt is not in control. And this time, God draws a line. The flies infest Egypt, but Goshen, where the Israelites live, is untouched. Separation has begun. Judgment is no longer general. It's precise. And still, Pharaoh resists. So the livestock fall. Disease sweeps the fields. Cattle, camels, sheep, dead. The wealth of Egypt collapses into the dust. But again, Israel is spared. Not a single animal dies. This is no coincidence. This is a confrontation. Egypt's gods are falling, one by one. And then come the boils. Pain now touches the body. Pharaoh's own magicians cannot even stand before Moses. They are covered in sores. Still, he will not relent. And God says to Moses, I could have wiped Egypt out entirely, but I have raised you up to show you my power, that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. This is not just about rescue. It's about revelation. Egypt is learning who truly rules the world. So, God sends hail. Fire and ice fall from the sky. Fields are flattened. Trees shattered. Homes battered. Only Goshen is calm. And Pharaoh finally speaks a new sentence. This time I have sinned, he says. The Lord is in the right. But the repentance is shallow. The promise to let them go fades as quickly as the storm. And so the locusts arrive, darkening the sky, eating everything the hail left behind. Destruction complete, and the officials of Pharaoh begin to break. How long will this man be a snare to us? They plead. Let the people go. But Pharaoh's pride still clings. He offers partial freedom. Only the men. But Moses knows the terms are not his to edit. All of us, he insists, with our young, our old, our flocks. This is not a negotiation. This is liberation. And Pharaoh refuses. So darkness comes, thick, tangible, a blackness that can be felt. 3 days of shadow, no sun, no light, just silence and stillness, a reversal of creation. And yet, Israel still has light in their dwellings. Because this is not just about nature, it's about presence. Where God is, there is light. And now, Pharaoh breaks again. Go, he says. Take your families, but leave your flocks. But Moses is unshaken. Not a hoof shall be left behind, he replies. We don't know what the Lord will require of us. This is full freedom, nothing less. And Pharaoh rages. Get out of my sight, he shouts. If I see you again, you will die. And Moses answers calmly, you will not see me again. The final plague has not yet arrived, but the silence before it is heavy. Moses walks away, not in fear, but in knowing, because God has already spoken. One more plague is coming, one that will not be announced with staff or serpent, but with sorrow. Midnight will fall, and every firstborn in Egypt will die, from Pharaoh's heir to the lowliest servant, even the cattle. But Israel will be spared, not by strength, not by hiding, but by blood. They will mark their doors with lamb's blood, and death will pass over, judgment and mercy in a single night. The plagues have built to this moment, each one a crack in Egypt's illusion of power, each one a call to repentance, each one a warning. And now, the final act is ready. The curtain of heaven begins to part, and the night is coming. The night is quiet, too quiet, as if the air itself is holding its breath. Inside the homes of Israel, there is movement, but not panic. Preparation. Lambs are being chosen, not the sick, not the leftover, but the best, unblemished, because this night isn't about survival. It's about obedience. Moses has delivered the instructions. Every household must take a lamb, slaughter it, take its blood, and paint it on the doorposts, top, sides, a frame of mercy. Then roast the lamb, no breaking its bones. Eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and eat in haste, with sandals on, staff in hand, cloaks tucked in, ready, because when the moment comes, there won't be time to pack. Freedom doesn't always knock twice. Outside, the city is unaware. Egypt still believes in its gods, still trusts its walls, still sleeps in palaces and slums alike. But midnight is coming, and with it, the angel of death. Inside the Israelite homes, the blood dries, a sign, not of their worth, but of their covering. It's not their lineage that saves them, not their labor, not their prayers, but obedience, faith expressed in crimson lines across wood. And then it begins. At midnight, death enters Egypt. It does not shout. It does not break down doors. It moves like shadow, like consequence, like finality. And in every Egyptian house, a cry rises, louder than storm, more piercing than battle. The firstborn are gone, from the heir of Pharaoh to the child of the prisoner, from the palace to the pasture. No house is spared, except those marked in blood. And Pharaoh? He calls for Moses in the night, not to negotiate, not to threaten, but to surrender. Go, he says. Leave my people. Take your flocks, your herds, your children, and bless me also. It's not defeat. It's desperation. And the Egyptians press them to leave. Now, immediately, there's no time for bread to rise. So the dough is carried raw, wrapped in cloth, on shoulders and backs. They leave with what they can carry: gold, silver, clothing, given freely by their former masters. Not stolen, bestowed. Egypt wants them gone. The plagues have not just broken Pharaoh. They've broken the will of a nation. And so, in the middle of the night, they go. A nation of slaves walking out in silence. There are no chariots, no banners, no fanfare, only freedom, hard won, holy, trembling. The Exodus has begun. 600,000 men, plus women and children. A sea of footsteps in the sand. The following is not a map, but a promise and a pillar. Cloud by day, fire by night. God leads them not the shortest way, but the safest, through the wilderness toward the sea. Because deliverance is not just about getting out. It's about becoming ready for what's next. But even as they march, there's tension. Behind them, Pharaoh wakes up to the silence of his city, the stillness of his palace, and his sorrow turns to rage. "What have we done?" he shouts. "We let them go." And so, the chariots roll, 600 of Egypt's best, horses, warriors, commanders, bearing down on the Israelites like a storm. And the people? They see the dust rising, the glint of armor in the sun, and fear takes hold. They cry out to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die? Better to serve in Egypt than die in the desert." It's the first test of their faith. And Moses answers not with strategy, but with stillness. "Do not be afraid," he says. "Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And then the sea opens. Moses lifts his staff. The water splits, not like a trickle, but like a canyon. Walls of water on both sides. Dry ground down the middle. And the people walk through, step by step, through a miracle, through memory. Each footprint is an act of faith. Each breath is a defiance of fear. Behind them, Egypt gives chase. The chariots thunder into the passage. But God is not finished. He confuses the army, throws wheels into chaos. And when the last Israelite steps onto the far shore, the waters collapse. Not slowly, not gently, but completely. Chariots vanish. Horses vanish. Soldiers vanish. And with them, Egypt's grip. The people stand in silence. Then the song begins. Moses sings, "I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Horse and rider he has hurled into the sea." It's not just a song of victory. It's a song of identity. They are no longer slaves. They are survivors, witnesses, and soon they will be wanderers, because freedom is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of becoming. Freedom is loud at first, joyful, exultant, but as the days stretch on, the silence sets in. The wilderness doesn't cheer. It doesn't echo. It waits. And the people begin to murmur, not because they miss slavery, but because they don't understand freedom. Not yet. 3 days without water. Then bitter springs at Marah, and the complaints begin. "What shall we drink?" So God shows Moses a tree. He throws it into the water, and the bitter becomes sweet. A miracle. Small, quiet, necessary, but it's not enough. Because thirst is only part of survival. Soon comes hunger, and with it, longing. We remember Egypt, they say. The meat, the bread, the pots are full of food. Their memory is selective. Their slavery was edited. But God doesn't scold. He provides. At twilight quail, enough for all. In the morning manna, not bread as they knew it, but flakes like frost, white, sweet. Daily, they're told to gather just enough for each day. No storing, no hoarding, except before the Sabbath, because this isn't just a provision. It's training. A lesson in dependence. Every morning, the same rhythm. Wake, gather, eat, trust. And those who try to keep more than needed, it rots. Because freedom is not just about escape. It's about new patterns, new trust. But trust is fragile. When the water runs out again at Rephidim, they demand answers. Is the Lord among us or not? And God answers with a rock. Moses strikes it. Water flows. A river in the desert. A reminder that presence isn't always loud. Sometimes it seeps through stone, but the tests keep coming, not just from within, but from enemies, Amalek attacks, without provocation. And Moses stands on a hill, staff raised. As long as his hands are lifted, Israel prevails. But when they lower, Amalek advances. So Aaron and Hur hold up their arms, one on each side, because even leaders need help. Even prophets need support. Victory comes not from strength, but from faith, from the community, from endurance. After the battle, Moses builds an altar, names it, "The Lord is my banner." Because the war was not won with weapons, but with worship. Still, the lessons aren't over. At Sinai, the mountain trembles. God descends in fire, cloud, and thunder. And the people? They're terrified. They draw back, beg Moses to speak for them. But God's desire is clear. He wants a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, not just rule followers, but covenant keepers. So the commandments are given, not to burden, but to bless, to shape a people who've never been free into a community of justice, mercy, and truth. No other gods, no idols. Honor the name, honor the day, honor parents. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't covet. Simple, sacred, revolutionary. And the people promise. All the Lord has spoken we will do. But as Moses lingers on the mountain, receiving the details of worship, the tabernacle, the priesthood, the people grow restless. They demand a God they can see, a calf of gold, born from fire and fear. And when Moses returns, he sees dancing, idolatry, forgetfulness, and he breaks the tablets. Symbolically, tragically, because freedom without memory is dangerous. And grace? It costs something. He pleads with God, not just for judgment, but for mercy. Blot me out, he says, if you won't forgive them. And God relents. He gives new tablets, new mercy, a new beginning, because this is not just a journey of distance. It's a journey of transformation. And the wilderness is not a detour. It's the classroom, where slaves become sons, where wanderers become worshipers, where manna falls, where fire leads, where water flows from stone, where trust is built, one test at a time. The mountain is wrapped in smoke. Thunder rumbles like distant drums. Lightning splits the sky. And the people wait. Moses is gone. Not for hours. Not for days. But for 40 days. And silence, when stretched too long, becomes fear. They begin to wonder, is he coming back? Is God still with us? Did we make it out of Egypt just to be abandoned here? And in that fear, impatience takes root. They gather around Aaron, not with questions, but with demands. Make us gods, they say, something we can see. something we can follow. And Aaron, man of compromise, gives in. He tells them to bring gold, earrings, nose rings, bracelets, jewelry taken from Egypt, now melted down into memory. And from that fire, shaped by human hands, comes a calf, a god not of power, but for convenience, a return to the known, to the visible, to the controllable. This is your God, O Israel, they cry, and they feast, dance, celebrate, not in reverence, but in rebellion. At the top of Sinai, God sees. He doesn't ask questions. He states the truth. Go down, he tells Moses. Your people, whom you brought up from Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned away quickly. They have made an idol. And then God offers Moses a terrible mercy. Leave me alone, that my anger may burn against them, and I will destroy them, and I will make you into a great nation. But Moses doesn't accept the offer. He doesn't step away. He steps in. He pleads, not as a judge, but as a mediator. Why should your anger burn against your people? He asks. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Remember your promise. And God relents. He does not destroy. But justice must still come. Moses descends, tablets in hand, heart heavy, and when he sees the calf, the dancing, the laughing, he throws the tablets down. Stone shatters. Covenant, broken before it was even read. He takes the calf, burns it, grinds it to powder, mixes it with water, makes them drink it. Because sometimes the only way to confront an idol is to taste its ashes. Then he turns to Aaron. What did these people do to you? He asks. That you led them into such great sin? And Aaron, fumbling, blames the people, blames the fire. Out came this calf, he says, as if idols birth themselves, as if leadership means appeasement. But Moses is not done. He calls for those still faithful, and the Levites respond. They draw swords. Judgment falls. 3,000 die, not from rage, but from reality, because holiness has a cost. The next day, Moses climbs the mountain again, back into the presence he never stopped needing. He prays, "Please forgive their sin. But if not, blot me out of your book." And God answers, "I will forgive who I will forgive. But go now. Lead the people. My angel will go before you. But not me, because if I go, I might destroy them. And that, to Moses, is unbearable." He pleads again. If your presence doesn't go with us, don't send us. Show me your glory. And God, patient and mysterious, agrees, but not fully, not face to face. He hides Moses in the cleft of a rock, covers him with his hand, and passes by, not in wrath, but in revelation. The Lord, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin, yet not leaving the guilty unpunished. This is God's glory, not thunder, not fire, but character, mercy and justice woven together. And Moses bows low. He receives new tablets, new commandments, because even after idolatry, there can be covenant. Even after failure, there is restoration. The second set of tablets are written, carried down the mountain. This time, not with anger, But with hope, the people are given instructions: how to build the tabernacle, how to honor the presence, how to dwell with the holy. And this time, they obey. They give. They build. They wait. Because grace has changed them. And now, they know. This is not just about leaving Egypt. It's about becoming something new. A people not defined by idols, but by intimacy. Not by golden calves, but by a cloud of glory. The wilderness still stretches, unchanged, but something is different now. The people have direction, not just a path, but a purpose, because God has given them instructions, not for escape, not for conquest, but for something even more sacred, a dwelling place, a home for His presence, the tabernacle, not a palace, not a monument, a tent, portable, movable, holy, because God is not tying Himself to geography, but to people. So, the instructions are detailed, precise. Every cubit was measured, every fabric chosen. Gold, bronze, acacia wood, fine linen dyed in blue, purple, scarlet. God is not vague. He is exact, because this is not about luxury. It's about symbolism. Every element points to something deeper. The Ark of the Covenant, holding the tablets, covered in gold, crowned with cherubim, where God's presence will rest. The table for bread, a reminder of the provision. 12 loaves, one for each tribe. The lampstand pure gold, 7 branches, light in the darkness. The altar of incense, the fragrance of prayer. The courtyard, the basin, the bronze altar for sacrifice. Blood and fire, forgiveness and atonement. All of it an echo of Eden. A return to communion, a space where heaven touches earth. And the people? They respond, not with reluctance, but with eagerness. They bring offerings. So much, in fact, that Moses has to tell them to stop. Because when the heart is stirred by grace, generosity flows. Skilled workers are chosen. Bezalel, Oholiab, artisans filled with the Spirit, creating not for profit, but for glory. Each stitch, each carving, each polish, worship in craftsmanship. Days pass, weeks, materials take shape. The tabernacle rises, and when it's finished, Moses inspects it. It's not just complete, it's faithful, done exactly as God commanded. So, he blesses the people. And then, something happens. The cloud descends. Glory fills the tent. Thick, radiant, unmistakable. Moses cannot enter. Not yet, because this is not just decoration. This is divine arrival. God is dwelling among them, not as a fire on a mountain, not as a voice from a bush, but in the center of the camp, close, present. Day by day, the cloud rests. Night by night, fire glows. And when it moves, they move. When it stays, they stay. Because they're no longer just travelers. They are a people with God in their midst. The journey is not over. The promised land is still far off. There will be rebellion, regret, renewal. But now they are different, because they know what presence feels like. They have seen mercy after failure, heard commandments carved in flame and grace, built a space for the holy with their own hands. And now, they follow not just for survival, but for worship. They are no longer just former slaves. They are carriers of covenant, witnesses of wonder, And every time they look at that tent, they remember. Freedom was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a relationship. And this God, he doesn't just speak from above. He walks with them, cloud by day, fire by night, step by step, until they are home. And so, as the fire flickers low and the desert winds settle, we end tonight's journey. From the crackling voice in the bush to the silence of the tabernacle, the story of Moses and the burning bush is not just history, it's transformation. It's about fear that finds faith, about obedience that reshapes identity, about people who learn slowly, painfully, that freedom is not comfort, but communion. We watched Moses doubt, speak, and lead. We watched Egypt tremble. We watched a nation walk out of bondage and into mystery. And above it all, we saw a God who was not distant, not detached, but present, guiding, correcting, providing, and dwelling, not in temples of stone, but among people, among us. So as you drift off tonight, remember, the wilderness may feel endless, but the fire still speaks, sometimes from a mountain, sometimes from a whisper, sometimes from within. And the journey, as strange and ancient as it may seem, still echoes in our own. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with me. If you enjoyed tonight's reflection, feel free to subscribe and share it with someone who might need rest or wonder. Until next time, may your path be soft and your spirit still. Good night. There will be a rebellion. There will be regret. And, by grace, renewal. But now, they are not who they once were. They are different, because they've known what presence feels like. They've stood in awe under a sky that burned with holy fire. They've tasted bread that fell with the morning dew. They've cried out in thirst and seen water pour from stone. They've watched Moses ascend into the cloud and return with glory on his face. They've heard commandments not whispered, but thundered, not etched by hands, but carved in flame and grace. They've built a space for the holy with their own hands. Hands once bound in labor, now crafting something sacred. They wove curtains, shaped acacia wood, and polished bronze. Every stitch, every measurement, every offering, an echo of worship, an act of memory, because they remember. They remember what it was like to have no name, no land, no voice. They remember Egypt, the chains, the silence of unanswered prayers. And they remember the night everything changed. The night the blood on the doorposts marked the beginning of a great deliverance. And now, they follow. Not just to escape the past, not just to survive the present, but to encounter something more, someone more. They are no longer just former slaves. They are carriers of a covenant, witnesses of wonder, chosen not because they were powerful, but because they were seen, known, loved. Every time they look at that tent, that holy tabernacle they remember. It stands not just as a structure, but as a reminder, freedom was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of a relationship. This God, he doesn't dwell in palaces. He doesn't hide in unreachable heavens. He walks among his people, cloud by day, fire by night, whisper by whisper. Step by step, when they move, the cloud goes with them. When they rest, it settles above them. When they grumble, he listens. When they disobey, he corrects. But he never leaves. Even in their failures, even when they mold idols from their own gold, his mercy returns like morning light. This is a story not of perfection, but of presence. not of certainty, but of trust, not of strength, but of surrender. The wilderness is harsh, dry, unforgiving, but in its silence, they hear the voice of God. Not always loud, not always clear, but always faithful. They are learning slowly. That worship is not a song or a place. It is a walk, a yielding, a becoming. And Moses, he too has changed. Once uncertain, once hesitant, now the friend of God. He who once asked, "Who am I?" now leads with authority not his own, but granted. He who once fled into the wilderness alone, now walks in it surrounded by a nation. He speaks with God as a man speaks to a friend. He listens. He intercedes. He climbs the mountain not to escape, but to draw near. And from that burning bush to the glowing tabernacle, we have watched him grow, watched him wrestle with calling, speak truth to Pharaoh, split the sea, strike the rock, stand between judgment and grace. And above it all, we have seen a God who is not distant, not silent, not waiting in the shadows, but present, always present. He leads, he provides, he disciplines, he stays. This God is not carved from stone, not forged in fire by human hands. He cannot be shaped. He cannot be controlled, but he can be known. And he chooses to be known. He dwells not in temples of gold, but in tents of humility. He chooses the wilderness as his sanctuary, and the hearts of the humble as his throne. So as the fire flickers low, and the desert winds begin to settle, we end tonight's journey. From the crackling voice in the bush to the quiet of the tabernacle, this is not just a history. It is a transformation. It is about fear that finds faith, obedience that reshapes identity, and a people who learn slowly, painfully, that freedom is not comfort. It is communion. We've watched Egypt tremble. We've watched the sea open. We've watched a nation form not by sword, but by spirit. We've seen rebellion, yes, but we've also seen return, mercy, presence, because the story is not about flawless faith. It is about a faithful God, a God who walks, who speaks, who forgives, who stays. And so, as you drift off to sleep, may you carry this truth. The wilderness may feel endless, but the fire still speaks. Sometimes from a mountain, sometimes from a whisper, sometimes from within. The journey of Israel is not so different from our own. We wander, we wait, we forget, but we are not alone. The God of Moses still walks, still guides, still speaks. So rest now. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to see the whole path. You just need to know He is with you, and He is enough. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with me. If tonight's reflection brought peace to your heart, feel free to subscribe and share it with someone who might need a gentle breath or a sacred pause. Until next time, may your path be soft, your breath deep, your spirit still, and your night full of presence. Good night.
you.